Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 201, and we're going to talk about virtue signaling, also known as, by me, weaponized Dunning Kruger. Actually, I was thinking about the Dunning Kruger effect, and I thought, it's if you weaponize that phenomena, you get virtue signaling. And so that's where the title basically came from. So gold reached an all-new high. The Fed cut interest rates by 0.5% last week. The BRICS Bank is maturing. You have all of these other countries waiting for the dollar to collapse. And so I started thinking about some of the effects of inflation, right? In the news, Israel just bombed Lebanon. You got Zanatzi over here in Pennsylvania signing artillery shells with the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, like rah rah, Ukraine, you're about to defeat Russia, right? I really wonder how many people actually still believe that lie. But here we are. And so these two wars, basically being funded primarily by the United States, is made possible by inflation. So printing money, yes, I know that it's not literally printing money anymore, but uh, it makes it very easy to hide a lot of this sort of evil behavior. And so I was able to work out a lot of these misinformation bits, if you will. But why is it that so many other people just have a hard time grasping the fact that the people who keep lying to them are lying again? I've compared the US government to an abuser, and the American people are the abused spouse. Right. And so the government will say, "Oh, this time I'll do better. I'm really sorry about the past, but this time I'm on the level with you." And people still fall for it. So it made me think of the Dunning-Kruger effect. In 1999, Justin Kruger, David Dunning, I guess, wrote a paper that talked about how uh, when you know just a little bit of information, you feel like you're an expert. So that's how most people kind of know it. In Asia, that kind of understanding that knowing a little bit, you think you're an expert. There are expressions for that. It goes back many, many hundreds of years, if not thousands. So basically, if you don't know something, you also don't have the ability to recognize that you don't know. And I used to say something very similar to this, right? And even Dick Cheney, when he was vice president, he would talk about, you know, or no, it was Rumsfeld. He would say there's the known, the unknown, and the unknown unknown. Right? So you don't even know that you don't know stuff, right? So a situation in which people believe that they are smarter and more capable than they are because they don't know just how much more information there is that you have to know and learn to truly understand. Low ability people, it is said, do not possess the skills needed to recognize their own incompetence, right? So they'll complain, they'll say, "Huh, why wasn't I accepted? Oh, I should have been great," right? So basically, fools are blind to their own foolishness. Incompetent people not only are bad at their job, but they are unable to accurately judge their own work. Like they don't realize that they're doing a bad job. And students, for example, when they fail lots of exams, they don't get it, right? I studied. Why did I do so badly? It's the teacher's fault, right? You get that a lot. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it is the teacher, but not always, right? And especially if someone is not that bright, then clearly they're suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. So a little knowledge leads to overconfidence. You think you're an expert when really you know very little. Little kids are like this a lot. I don't know if you, I had four little kids, and you know, a lot of them have had that made that mistake of, thinking they know a lot more than they actually do. Imposter syndrome is the opposite, right? And it's a weird label, imposter syndrome, where you underestimate your abilities. So rather than overestimating, you're underestimating. I don't know why they're going to call it imposter syndrome, but whatever. So I think we should all make it clear that all of us at one time or another have been guilty of Dunning Kruger. I myself was particularly bad. So then I was thinking, this is kind of like, not exactly, but kind of like virtue signaling, right? So a lot of people who virtue signal, they really don't know a whole lot of information. They have very little information, yet they act like and pretend and behave in a way that uh, they know everything, right? The confidence that they have can only come from ignorance, right? Because if you really were wise, then you'd know that maybe violence and destruction is not the proper response simply because you think you know more than other people. So virtue signaling, and I've talked about that before, but also not in a title of a episode. So I'll just do it formally here. Both of them, which I've talked about before, and just put them together. So virtue signaling is the act or practice of conspicuously displaying one's awareness of political issues, matters of social justice, racial justice, etc. So the key here is, I got that from Webster's online, I think. Conspicuously displaying. So you want everyone to see you for doing something really good, right? So it's the influencers recording themselves picking up trash from the beach and saying, "Look how virtuous I am." Right? I don't know if you saw that video. And as soon as they got enough footage, they just left everything on the beach, right? And they just walked away, right? Including now a large plastic garbage bag, right? So it's they want everyone to see how they're doing something really cool, but in reality, yeah, they're not really doing it. So to virtue signal is to portray oneself as better than other people, or that you have insider information, you're in the know and everyone else is not. And perhaps maybe in the whole process, you're trying to shame everybody else. See, you're not doing it, I am. So, moral grandstanding is another explanation of virtue signaling, right? So it's not enough that you did something good and you feel good yourself. You want everyone else to know it as well. Moral grandstanding. And clearly, we see this in scripture, right? So in the Christian scripture, New Testament, whatever you want to call it, where you have some people who announce that they're about to do something really great and they want a lot of other people to see it. And I guess back in the day, when a celebrity would donate a lot of money to a certain cause or something, the TV crews would come out and they would say, "Ooh, look how great this is." And a lot of the people who watched that growing up would say, "Wow, one day I wish I was in a position where I'd be able to do that." And so now with social media and the internet, a lot of people can sort of pass themselves off as something like that, except without all of the money, right? So I'm really often surprised at how little information that people have. So sometimes I get into a discussion with someone I went to high school with, and because I know the person doesn't do any reading at all, in spite of having gone to an Ivy League school, they don't really seem to really understand much of anything. And so whenever they post something, I respond in meme because, words are too hard for this person. So I'm just going to respond in pictures. But finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to start trying to communicate with this guy because obviously he thinks I'm a Republican. And it's sort of like, dude, do you ever read any of my stuff? Right? Clearly, I'm not a Republican. I just start making fun of him, and he tries to respond, and I just basically say, look, you're not funny, but I am. And he just totally, after a while, I think he got the point that he's engaging me on the wrong wavelength. Which is why I love the beauty of teaching. I would teach deconstruction and the concept of knowledge production, which I'm sure I didn't invent, but I heavily used, and I use that expression, making knowledge. I talked about it in some of the earlier single digit episodes of this podcast. But it's that process of making knowledge for other people to consume. We all do it, right? And we make knowledge based on our subjectivity. So whatever it is that we can see from our perspective, that's the information that we're going to produce, right? Oh, how was that movie? Well, that movie was awesome, or that movie was horrible. You're going to share information based on your subjectivity. And so once you get people to understand that, truth is subjective, right? You attach the label truth to, information that you prefer. And obviously me, myself as a Jesus freak, I'm going to attach that truth label to certain bits of information. It's true for me, but to an atheist, it has no truth value at all. And so, what is true, what is real, what is a fact, we can go on all day, is subjective. And people, I used to play games with people where people used to test me, right? This one person said, well, the capital of the United States is always going to be Washington, D.C. Everyone knows this, it's a fact. And I said, oh, so 500 years ago, was this true? And you can play all these games to show how truth or fact is subjective, right? It depends on the time, place, circumstance, context, language that you're using, even, all of these different situations, are basically subjective, right? And so we're not really too sure, but people speak as if whatever information, whatever subjective bit of information they have is universal. It is an absolute. And so you're able to have these longer discussions in the classroom to get people to realize, oh, wow, I never thought of it that way. So something that I thought was absolutely true is only sometimes true. And so it's not a gotcha moment, right? So I don't teach in such a way where it's like, see, you're wrong now, repent, sinner. No, I don't do that. It's just like you can continue to maintain your subjectivity. That's fine. But just understand that no one else is going to agree with you because they have different subjectivities. So the goal is to get better information. And so, like I said, this whole knowledge production deconstruction thing that I used to teach in college was a result of my own personal experiences. I was really bad with the Dunning Kruger. I was Mr. Know-it-all. I mean, I talked out of my butt and pretended to be an authority when I was the biggest idiot in the room, but I got slammed really quickly, right? Every time I would open my mouth and it said, oh, well, really, this is what's going on. And people who knew more, of course, would put me in my place very quickly, and I was very humiliated. I was embarrassed, but it didn't stop me from doing it again, right? And I did it over and over and over again. So in a way, I kind of understand all these other people who are doubling down on their subjective points of view. But I learned eventually. I mean, I used to be an aspiring meathead, I lift things up, I put them down. I was pretty much a kind of a dope, but I worked it out. And the reason was because I kept getting punished for thinking I was an expert when I wasn't. In other words, the consequences of speaking out of ignorance caught up to me very, very quickly. And sometimes the more subtle hints to you that you're making a fool out of yourself were the most painful, right? So you're acting all confident and you think everyone is admiring your omniscience. And then someone will say something very understated, and I got the message, and I was very embarrassed. And it happened, I guess, several times very, very quickly. And that's when I began to realize, oh, I am a moron. And so I sort of changed my attitude. And it's something that I try to teach my kids to. I don't know if they actually listen to me or not, but now I walk into a room, I don't say anything. I just listen to everyone else talk. I let everyone else reveal their Dunning Kruger virtue signaling, right? And so then I get to see where everyone is. I get to see everyone else's and try to guess what their subjectivity is. And so then I plan out how I'm going to respond to anything anyone says, or if I were to make a statement, how I could make the statement, taking into consideration the audience, right? So the consequences are what got me. And but the problem is these days, people seem to go on much, much older. Like I figured it out probably before I was 25. But why are people in their 30s and their 40s and their 70s and they still haven't figured it out? And I think it's because of all of the money printing. With all of the liquidity sloshing around in the economy, as some economists would say. In other words, with so much money floating around in society, creating companies and corporations and occupations and opportunity where there should be none, the consequences are delayed. And this means that the pain that will ultimately come will be that much more. So Israel, I mean, they're pursuing this self-destruction, really, if you think about it. I mean, they can't afford to lose all of these lives in their own, militia, their own volunteer military. They don't have that many people living in that country willing to fight. And so they're basically, destroying itself. Their economy is already wrecked. And that's why the United States gives them so much money, not just for weapons, but also to pay everyone in society because no one can really work. The economy is kind of ruined. All the workers are in the battlefield. Ukraine, I mean, you got all this poor leadership. You got all these bad decisions, one after another, all these people dying. Some people will say that the, kill count of Ukrainian soldiers is over 600,000. They started the war with 300,000 soldiers and 600,000 are dead. I mean, that you gotta, that should make you at least pause, but why does it keep going? Because of American money printing. And now even the United States itself, we're on the brink of financial ruin. And yet people can't really see it. And it's because it's failure made easy, right? Failure covered up by all of this liquidity, all of this cash floating around. So and that delays the reckoning. It prevents people from seeing the consequences of their own Dunning Kruger. It prevents people from getting their comeuppance from virtue signaling, right? No one's going to prison for the right things. No one's really getting punished for the things that they're doing. And so often I think on certain things like Russia might be bad. It might be. I don't know. I don't care about international stuff. I don't really keep up with it. So maybe they are bad, but I'm not living in Russia. Putin's not my president, right? And Putin himself may be really bad. He might have done really bad things, but the US is not that much better, if at all. If anything, because it had the world's reserve currency, it is a lot worse. I mean, I don't see Russia interfering in all of these elections currently. I mean, I'm sure they do, just like most countries who can do. But the level of poverty, death, and destruction that the US has brought to this world, it's, I think, off the charts. So, yeah, okay, Putin may be bad, but the United States and a whole list of presidents, not much better, if at all. So, something to think about, I guess. Dunning-Kruger effect, people who think that they know more than they actually do. They generally are your virtue signalers. Basically doing and following the orders of others who are willing to pay them to do all of that stuff, which basically comes down to destructive immaturity. And there it is. So, virtue signaling, weaponized Dunning Kruger. That's it for today. I will talk to you next time.